Hope all of you are keeping safe. Pleasure to be here to share the highlights and the financial performance for quarter four and the financial year ending 2021. So overall, it's been a fairly disruptive and uncertain financial year, I think, for all of us. And in the face of this, we as the IIFL Wealth and Asset Management family are very proud of where we are today. A big call out to all our clients, our people, and all our ecosystem partners who have enabled us to show sustained strong performance across financial and other metrics. Overall, client sentiments have remained positive over the last quarter, and we continue to see high levels of liquidity. However, uncertainties emerging from the continuing pandemic situations are still an overhang. And we are, as I'm sure all of you are as well, closely monitoring for any impact and when we see situation getting back to normal. But let me start with a brief overview on the financial performance of the company. Unfortunately, Mihir is facing some network issues, so I'll take this part from him. So for the quarter ended March 31st, as well as the financial year 2021, firstly, on the assets under management on the AUM side, our overall AUM increased 3.2% quarter on quarter to rupees 2,07,044 crores from rupees 2,0494 crores in quarter three, and it was up 31.9% for the full year. ARR assets increased 12.7% quarter on quarter to rupees 1,01,969 crores from rupees 90,500 crores in quarter three, and up 62.9% for the full year. It's a milestone for us, having crossed the 1 lakh crore at AUM on the ARR side. Our loans book has increased 19.9% quarter and quarter to rupees 3,620 crores from 3,019 crores in quarter three, and up 2.38% for the full year. Moving on to revenues, our total revenues for this quarter increased 2.7% quarter on quarter to 287 crores, while our ARR revenues for this quarter has increased 4.3% quarter on quarter to rupees 161 crores. Other income for the quarter stands at rupees 22 crores and the full year at 137 crores. Overall, on a 12-month basis, we reported an overall revenue of 1,053 crores, which is up 23.74% year on year. On the expenses side, our total expenses for the quarter remained flat at rupees 152 crores. Of this, total employee cost increased by 2.8% quarter on quarter. However, administrative and other expenses were down 6.2% quarter on quarter to rupees 40 crores. Accordingly, our overall cost to income ratio has reduced to 53% for the quarter. On a 12-month basis, our overall expenses have remained flat at rupees 568 crores. On the profitability side, operating PBT for the quarter increased 29.8% quarter on quarter to rupees 113 crores from rupees 87 crores last quarter. And it was up 20.9% year on year from 94 crores in quarter four of FY20. PAT for the quarter increased 5.3% to 103 crores from 97 crores. On a 12-month basis, PAT for FY21 was up 78.9% at rupees 369 crores from rupees 206 crores in FY20. So having covered the financial performance, let me move on to sharing some of the key business highlights for the quarter as well as for the full year. I think specifically to start with, three specific highlights on the AUM and retention side. Firstly, we have seen strong net flows for the quarter at rupees 5,800 crores. Total net flows for the year were in excess of 14,000 crores organically, without including the flows that came in as a part of the L&T acquisition completed in April of last year. This 14,000 crores, as you would recognize, is only marginally below our pre-COVID full year target of rupees 15,000 crores. Through the year, client acquisitions have also been robust. Secondly, our asset management business has seen extremely strong traction with 70% increase in AUM for the full year and over 15% increase in the last quarter as well. We continue to see strong flows into our listed and unlisted equities strategies, driven by the strong performance of our fund, the differentiated offerings, as well as large institutional mandates. We've also strengthened the team last quarter with Amar Mirani joining us to lead the real estate strategy. Thirdly, total retentions have held up at 57 bips vis-a-vis the 54 bips for last year. We remain confident that this will sustain at the 54 to 55 bips level for this year as well, with wealth being close to 50 bips and asset management at around 70 bips. So while I covered the financials earlier, I just want to highlight that our total revenue is back at the FY19 levels. Now, why that is important is because that was the period prior to our transition to the recurring revenue-based model. And we've taken this 24 months to come back to the same level as far as total revenues is concerned. But very importantly, the mix has changed significantly, with the share of ARR in revenue from operations increasing from 43% in FY19 to 63% in FY21. And this is on track to get us to the steady state of about 70 to 75% over the next 12 to 18 months. The other highlight has been our dividend payout. We maintained our aggressive dividend policy by paying out 70% of our FY21 PAT as dividend, amounting to rupees 30 per share. This is in addition to the special dividend of rupees 40 paid as a part of the capital release initiatives that we've spoken about every quarter. Overall, our profit after tax for the year at 369 crores and cost to income ratio at 54% are both comfortably ahead of the guidance that we had given, a testimony to our focus on increasing productivity as well as the cost optimization initiatives that we have been undertaking over the last 12 to 18 months. This has also allowed us to revise upwards our guidance for FY22. Specifically, we expect net flows at approximately rupees 20,000 crores next financial year, largely equally split between wealth and asset management. With the increase in top line and our continued focus on cost optimization, we expect the cost to income ratio to tend towards the 50% mark over the next 12 to 24 months. Capital allocation continues to remain a key focus area for us, and we expect to maintain our aggressive dividend payout policy. Accordingly, we expect to improve our absolute ROE to over 15% in FY22 and tend towards the targeted 20% mark by FY23. As you would have seen, the ROE this year vis-a-vis last year has itself seen a significant jump. Some of the other aspects of the business that are very critical. First, we believe our focus on digital remains imperative. We have traditionally been at the forefront of adoption of technology, with Salesforce as our preferred CRM solution, Altior as our held away consolidation platform, and other early stage adoptions. However, I think we all recognize the pace of change, both from the client side as well as on the technology front, remains high. And we remain committed to investing heavily to make digital a part of everything we do. Basically, embed digital in our organizational DNA. And as a part of this, we are embarking on a transformational journey to reimagine our client and banker journeys. How do we embed intelligence through the entire journeys, as well as upgrade our overall tech and data architecture? We will keep you posted as we progress on this particular front. We are also continuing to deploy technology to drive efficiencies in our internal processes. Things like robotic process automations, we've had success in our pilot and are looking now at scaling up. The updated investor presentation is available on the website. One last point before I hand over. As we have done each quarter, we continue to enhance our level of detail provided in our investor presentation. Happy to inform that from this quarter onwards, an Excel data book that contains all previously published data across quarters will be available for download on our website. I'm hoping that for a lot of you, this will make life a lot easier to understand and handle our information. So with that, I request if we can move on to the Q&A section, and I'll hand it over to Karan to take us through the same.
Thank you, Anshuman. I now invite Mr. Karan Bhagat to join us for the session. May I remind you, please tap on the raise hand icon in case you wish to ask a question. Kindly introduce yourself and your firm and then ask your question. We'll just give it a minute for the question line to line up. The first question we have from Prashant. Prashant, could you just unmute yourself and ask your question? Kindly introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. Is it Prashant from SBI Mutual Fund? Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. So just wanted to check, out of your total debt of around 4,700 crores, how much would be backed up by investments?
So all of it more or less, and a lot of it is liquid fund investment. So we've got a large kind of MLD maturing in the month of June and July, close to around about 14 to 1500 odd crores. So that kind of gets paid at that point in time. So for the last quarter, it's reflecting slightly higher liquid investments, but everything is more or less backed by investments.
Sure. And the entire, would all of them would be MLDs, or would there be any other type of borrowing?
So 97 to 98% of our borrowing is in the form of MLDs, and kind of 2.5, 3% would be in the form of CPs. But 97, 98% is in the form of MLDs. It obviously gives us the leeway of having a much longer term borrowing. The cost is slightly higher than CPs, but it ensures that we are never exposed to any kind of asset liability mismatch.
Sure, sure. And just another question. I think you had around 30,000 crores of assets that were under advisory that you had to sort of classify by March, right? So how has that panned out?
So part of it is obviously kind of got reclassified under distribution, but most of it is going to move to advisory. So I think from a client perspective, we've got a good feedback. And I think more or less most of the corporate treasuries are happy to kind of move into the advisory program. So I think over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll see more or less all those assets kind of moving under advisory. I don't see any loss of assets there.
Sure, sure. And just the last question, what would the other income, 137 crores, what would that be?
So largely other income is for last year, obviously is a function of nearly 2 years combined put together, because last March you had a significant fall in the other income, largely on account of the steep correction in the last quarter of last financial year. So a large part of that is kind of got reversed in this financial year. So 137 crores in that sense is made up of broadly, if I can put it in this sense, 2 elements. The first element really in some senses is if you see our capital outside of the NBFC, we would have around about 800 to 900 odd crores of equity capital, which would generate anywhere from 7 to 8% a year, being invested broadly in liquid debt instruments and so on and so forth. And the rest of it would really be a function of the alternative investment funds, which we've got another 1,000 crores invested into, which are basically the sponsor investments and the non-sponsor investments. So those that would really kind of add up to the other income. And this will obviously get netted off for some of the borrowing, which is kind of reflected on this.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. I'll come back in the queue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Prashant.
And to just give you an exact, to give you an exact breakup, I think Pawan can come back in the next 10-15 minutes, but I think the AIFs contribute close to around about 85 to 90 crores of that 137 crores for the last financial year.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Remind you, please tap on the raise hand icon if you wish to ask a question. Next in line, we have Mr. Mohit Mangal. Mohit, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. This is Mohit Mangal from Anand Rathi Securities. So I've got 2-3 questions. The first question is in terms of the IFL1 assets. So I think IFL1 assets, we ended the year with around 28,000 crores. And I'm sure that, if the pandemic was not there, then the number would have been much higher. I think a few quarters back, we guided for around 40,000 crores. So, considering the current situation, what would be our strategy to increase the IFL1 assets and any ballpark figure for financial year 22?
I think what's really happened is a combination of two things. I think honestly, between Jan to March, we saw a fairly strong momentum towards some distribution-based products, annuity-driven, but distribution-based. And what it kind of, from a firm perspective, ended up resulting in some long-term funds being raised, but not necessarily on the IFL1 platform, because momentum was extremely strong in the market. So I think there was a little bit of diversion of attention between the two. But within the overall set, I think we've been able to get to the 100,000 crores of ARR. But within the mix of the ARR, I think IFL1 for the last quarter has been a little slow. I think 3 reasons really, if I was to kind of look back. The first reason is like what I pointed out, which is a little bit of diversion of attention towards the products at hand. Second, I think was really a function of a little bit of adoption. I think we still kind of getting all the licenses, the certification right. I think it's still going to take another 2 to 3 months. It's a long process. We need all our relationship managers very soon to get certified. Our technology piece on the advisory side is also nearly there. But I think we'll be well settled over the next 2 to 3 months. A little bit of, I think, slippage is there on account of that. And third, I think, from adoption perspective within the relationship managers, I think we're still 2/3 of the way there. We would have liked to be, from an IFL1 perspective, be the top priority for every relationship manager. But I think that's around about 65-70% of the way there. So I think overall, from a next year perspective, I think this should be the biggest delta. I think I see existing stock also moving there, and more or less large part of the new AUM, all of it will come under this program. It's not going to really come into the distribution program. All new clients we've signed over the last let's say couple of quarters are largely coming here. What is taking a little bit of time is the movement of the existing stock from distribution to IFL1. So I think from a next year perspective, the IFL1 plan itself, I think it's fair to assume should grow by at least 50 to 55% from the current number.
Yeah, that's great. My second question is, in terms of releasing the capital. So I think in Q1 21, you said that, the office that we owned in Lower Parel, we would like to sell that office and maybe lease it back so that we can have an accretive ROE effect. So any new developments on that front?
No, so I think from a dividend perspective, you're fairly keen to figure out the right method and way either to borrow against the building optimally, or you would like to ideally release another 35-40 rupees per share of capital this year, sometime during the course of this year, similar to what we did last year. And I think post the release of the 35-40 rupees per share, it more or less gets us down to a 2,000 crore net worth outside of goodwill. And 2,000, and which we believe is more or less the standard capital which we'll require in the business. So I think from a dividend perspective, another 35-40 rupees of a special dividend from a capital release perspective through this year, either driven by the sale of the office or by the right debt restructuring of the equity against that office, and ensuring that we continue with our 75-80% of the current year profits as dividends will kind of continue. So I think this year we will look at the right time and opportunity to look at that special dividend of 35 to 40 rupees, which will get us down to then our stable capital of 2,000 crores.
Fantastic. My last question is more generalized. So now that we have completed a full year of pandemic, so how has been the experience in terms of client behavior? Are they still fearful? Are they withdrawing money or are they increasing the portfolio? As to how your experience has been over the last 1 year?
Actually, it's very interesting. I think there are two parts to your question, and I think it's lesser to do with the pandemic. Honestly, I think clients are looking slightly beyond the pandemic, at least in terms of investments. So I think the fear factor is surely not as high as it was in April, May, June of last year. I think clients are willing to look beyond. I think from an asset allocation perspective also, I think it's fair to say 15 to 20% of the equity allocation continues to be on the sidelines. But outside of that, people are willing to invest. We've seen a very interesting trend over the last 6 to 9 months on two sides. One, I think, given the low interest rates at 4.5%, 5%, the post-tax return more or less is down to 2.5%, 3% on the fixed income side, and that's kind of requiring the clients to think beyond the box. For some clients, it's resulting in a slightly higher direct equity, large cap, high quality stock allocation. For the other clients, they're willing to be a little bit more, for the lack of a better word, I won't call it adventurous, but they're willing to take a little bit longer term risks in terms of alternates and so on and so forth. So I think in that sense, we are going to see a structured credit, unlisted equity. A part of all of this becomes move from typically 3 to 4% of our clients' portfolio to around about 7, 8, 10%. And I think these two behavioral changes are very, very obvious. And I think as interest rates continue to remain fairly low, I think there will be enough appetite for investment opportunities which are slightly differentiated.
Perfect. That's from my side. All the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mohit. The next question is from the line of Saptashri. Saptashri, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, this is Saptashri from Central Business. Good afternoon, and thank you for this presentation and good round of data for the Excel. My first question is on the variable cost side. Like in the beginning of the year, we have guided that the variable cost should be in the range of 20, maybe 25% of the fixed employee cost. But I think now for the full year, it comes to around 40% of the fixed employee cost. Is there any one-off, or is it going to be the run rate going forward?
So I think from an employee cost perspective, it will be in the region of 33 to 37%. I think we would ideally want it to be closer to the 35% range. Obviously, depending on how the year is, it can kind of move, let's say, between 33 to 37 or maybe 32.5 to 37.5. From a last year perspective, you see it at close to around about 40%, which is essentially a function of two things. Largely a function, actually, mostly of one thing, but it's essentially the ESOP cost. So we had last year is the year where we've taken the largest amount of ESOP cost on account of the one-time allocation to the entire corporate team and asset management team we had recruited 2.5 years back. So out of the entire employee cost of 410 crores, nearly 45 odd crores is on account of the on account of the ESOPs, which is not going to be a repetitive number every year. ESOPs will obviously be there, but the overall impact and cost will be substantially lower than the 45 crores repeating every year. So I think that's the big kind of delta, and I think there's an increased variable cost of around about 10 to 15 crores composite, which has been accounted in a blend of Q3, Q4, which is largely on account of the incremental performance and a little bit of the incentives given on the ARR assets as compared to the transaction revenue. So I think overall, if I was to see you kind of break up the 410 crores, I think on a stable basis, this would be in the region of around about 350 odd crores plus another 20 odd crores of ESOP cost, 20-25 crores of ESOP cost. That's really where I would have liked it to be. I think we've got another 30 crores additional ESOP cost last year and another 10 to 15 crores extra variable cost. But from a business perspective, I think 33 to 37% on account of employee expenses and another 15 odd % in terms of admin expenses.
Understood. Great. And secondly, I think last time we have talked about that as they are replacing some of the high interest borrowings, and therefore our cost of funds will reduce. But when I see your NIM for the loans, it seems that lower quarter on quarter. So is there anything I'm missing in this part?
So cost of borrowing is actually coming down fairly quickly, but as I said last time, our incremental cost of borrowing is down to around about 7 quarter, and even in some cases 6.75. for 12, 24, and 36 months. But like I said, we have a large repayment coming in through one which has already happened in May, another portion which is happening in June, and a large portion in July. So we will see a quarter-on-quarter down. I think this quarter on a closing basis will be down from around about 865, 870 to around about 815, 820. And I think from an incremental basis, next quarter will be down to around about 785, 790 on the borrowing side. But we've also been a little competitive on the lending side. So we've seen a 30-40 basis points decrease on the lending rates. But the contraction in NIM is largely a function of the fact that the loan book has grown towards the end of the quarter as opposed to at the beginning of the quarter.
Great. And lastly, my question is slightly on a longer term basis, maybe kind of a decadal story. So we have seen that for last couple of years, because there have been events like the ER cut and all this, our yields have come down. My question is, going forward for a stable medium to longer term, what will be revenue and PAT yield for this kind of a wealth management business? Because we will have multiple events like ETFs and passive funds coming out, and then moving to products like IFL1, customers moving to fixed fee structure. So all of these put together, trends put together, what will be the kind of a revenue and PAT yield maybe you can foresee for this business?
So I think we're kind of moving there quite quickly. It's I personally feel it won't take a decade. It might be 12 to 18 months, but it'll head there fairly quickly. And I think the broad maths is fairly kind of well defined in that sense. I think 100 odd rupees is essentially, I'm just going to take an example of an asset at 100 odd rupees. I think broadly fees on something like IFL1, which will keep moving into advisory, because the ability to actually put into the broker plan for either PMS schemes or mutual fund schemes will become really difficult and next to impossible. I think the fees there will really kind of be in the region of 45 to 50 bips, but it has to be a fairly right combination of large accounts, medium large accounts, discretionary, non-discretionary, and advisory. Only then you'll reach the 45-50 basis points. If it's only large accounts, I think you'll hit the 35 basis points in terms of fees. So number one, I think the fee itself will be in the region of 45 to 50 basis points. But the ability to get to the 45-50 will be a function of the mix of some of the variables I pointed out. Because if it's only the large accounts, you're right, they will at some point and then some size move to a fixed fee, which will get it down on average to 30-35 basis points. Second, obviously, there is an element of 10 to 15 basis points of transaction fee, which will always remain. It's virtually impossible to kind of rule that out from the system. And finally, you'll have another 8 to 10 basis points coming from net interest margin. So typically, globally also, you've effectively broadly seen a 75 to 80 basis points. I think that's where we'll settle down here. Also, we'll see a 70 to 75 basis points overall retention broken into those three sets. The cost to income ratio, I think, will settle down at, depending on the operating leverage we can build in the system, will settle down between the 50 to 52% range over a period of time. I think in the mix between the wealth and the asset management business, it will head towards the 50%. Purely on the wealth management business, it might be closer to the 52, 53%. And on a blended basis, it will head towards the 50%. And broadly from a PBT perspective, I think it'll be in the 35, 37 basis points range. Then obviously adjusted for the tax, maybe in the region of around about 27, 28 basis points.
Understood. So basically kind of mix, and as well as increasing our AMC assets will be a key to increasing the yield. I think
yield and more importantly, cost to income. Obviously, the operating leverage is slightly higher on the asset management side as compared to the wealth management side. So I think though it's not as high as it is in a simple, as it is in the mutual fund, on the alternative investment fund side, it's not that high, but it's definitely higher than it's on the wealth management side. So I think the ability to hit the 50% cost to income ratio will be a function of being able to grow both.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the detailed answer. Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Saptashri. Just a reminder to all participants, in case you wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand icon. The next question is from the line of Sukriti. Sukriti, please introduce yourself and you may ask your question.
Hi, Karan. This is Sukriti from Laburnum Capital. Actually, I'm going to start off from the last point you made in the previous question. So could you talk to me in some detail about how operating leverage could play out in your wealth management business over the next couple of years? And specifically, if you could break this down a little bit into unit economics. So for example, per client-facing team, what is the multiple of non-direct or overhead costs? And how do you expect that to go over time?
So broadly speaking, I think from a function of overheads within the wealth management team itself, I think each team, broadly speaking, has a senior banker with a fixed cost somewhere in the region of 80 lakhs to 1.25 crores, and typically is made up of 2-3 more junior bankers together with a small service team. So typically speaking, if you look across the system, I think one such team would be from a salary cost perspective in the region of 2.5 odd crores. Typically speaking, the associated direct costs would largely be around three other kind of associated verticals. The first would be essentially the investment counselor or the advisory vertical, which is kind of needed for the larger clients. You've obviously got the product team, which kind of helps in deep vertical kind of specialization across each asset classes. And third, obviously, you have the execution team on the brokerage side. Now, typically, these three kind of get loaded onto each team's cost. And then obviously you have the other expenses around admin cost and so on and so forth. And finally, the variable bonus. So this would really be the 4 components of cost in that sense. So I'm kind of breaking it up into the direct salary cost and the remaining 3 kind of costs. Now, typically in our experience, a direct salary cost of 2 to 2.25 crores would additionally, if I include all these 3 elements, which is the product team, this advisory team, as well as the execution team, plus the variable bonus, I think it would work out to give or take approximately another 2.25 to 2.5 crores. So effectively a team which is got a salary cost of 2.25 effectively to break even, assuming all of these factors, would be effectively at 4.5-5 crores, which effectively on a reverse maths basis of the 70 to 75 basis points would mean approximately $100 million of ARR AUM or chargeable AUM is effectively what will be needed for the team to kind of break even. So around about 700 to 750 crores is what would be needed for the team to kind of break even. And obviously post that it starts becoming profitable. Now the operating leverage obviously comes in the fact of the associated indirect costs, both in terms of the advisory, product, and the execution team, which does not move proportionately. And even the variable bonuses, while they move up, they don't move as proportionately as compared to the fixed salaries. So effectively, I think from an operating leverage perspective, it's in the remaining 4 portions post the break even. But it's not easy to get $100 million of AUM chargeable at 70-75 basis points. So depending on when you've done the recruitment and when you've retained, when you've got the team to move, typically the team might take anywhere from 2 to 2.5, 3 years to kind of break even.
Got it. And overall, how so this 1:1 ratio of direct, non-direct cost per team now, what's that in your steady state or optimal scenario? Or let's say even like, how would you see that 3 years down the line?
So I think it'll come down to around about 65-70%. As I said earlier, I don't think from a pure wealth business, we'll ever have an operating leverage where the cost to income comes down to 30-35%. I think it will come down towards the, from, if I was to kind of dissect the 2 businesses today, I think wealth by itself will be closer to the late 50s in some ways, or 56, 57, and asset management will be closer to the 52, 53. I think there's a scope of improving 5 to 6% in both places. And therefore, I think, you would typically see a 1.7, 1.75 kind of multiple come through.
Karan, if I may just add a point on that, I think in addition to just the reduction in multiple as far as cost is concerned, it's a question of how do we provide all the tools and bring in digital that will increase the number of clients that the team can handle, and therefore the productivity of the team going up. So the ability, instead of doing 700, 750, can they do higher? And that I think will be a big focus area for us in the next 12 to 24 months as well.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think span of control is something which kind of most of the global firms have been able to work well on. And I think 2-3 things have contributed to span of control. I think the first one, as Anshuman's pointing out, is digital. Obviously, building the entire workflow well is important. And second thing, which is really contributed to span of control, is the ability to build the right platform on the advisory and the discretionary side. So the RMs find it substantially more easier to manage larger relationships. So I think span of control is going to be definitely a key variable to getting the operating leverage right. And within span of control, I think both these things are going to be important.
Super. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sukriti. The next question is from the line of Mr. Parag Jariwala. Parag, please introduce yourself and unmute your line.
Yeah, hi, Karan. So this is Parag from Vito Capital. My question is, with respect to one earlier participant, you mentioned that 75 odd basis point of revenue and post-tax around 25-27 basis point of PAT yield. Are you referring this only to a wealth management business or the combination of both wealth as well as asset management?
No, the wealth management business.
Okay, so the asset management would be, on a sustainable business could be slightly better?
I think from an yield perspective, again, asset management is going to be a function of, obviously, if the growth continues to be largely driven by alternates, then it would be slightly better. If the growth is, let's say, through a mix of some bit of institutional mandates as well as, let's say, growth on the listed equity side in terms of the mutual fund, or let's say some debt products, then obviously yield can come down. So in that sense, right now, obviously, out of our 37,000 crores, a large portion is really in the first segment I spoke about, and therefore the yields continue to be fairly attractive there. I think if a large part of the collections is there, I think you're right. The yields will continue to be fairly attractive, and I think the cost to income ratios will improve substantially. I think on the asset management side, if you see, we've added some very senior 4-5 investment professionals over the last 2 years. I think maybe 1% short or maybe 1.5 people short, but otherwise we are more or less there. And it kind of has its own impact both in terms of the ability of the team to manage that quantum of money as well as our ability to kind of collect new money. So I think some bit of operating leverage on the asset management side is also going to happen because we've only really got to 82 or maybe 70 to 80% of our team over the last 12 months. We're still not 100% there, but we are 70 to 80% there, and most of the senior team members in that sense have come in over the last 6 to 18 months.
Fair point. The reason also I'm asking this is, if you look at the guidance which have, shared by you guys, in FY23, if I just back calculate the, PAT yield, it comes out to be around, slightly less than 20 basis point. So, broadly, even if, if you go by our arithmetic, it should be at least, the PAT should be at least around 20% higher than what you guys are guiding.
So I think I'm just kind of making a distinction there. The transaction assets obviously are yielding a lower number. So when I'm talking about, so transaction AUM, I think will have to be kind of looked at slightly differently. Okay. I think the ARR AUM will yield what I'm saying. The transaction AUM will be slightly lower in terms of yield.
Understood.
That's the reason you're seeing the 20 bips. Actually, if you just do it on the ARR, you'll arrive at the yields, what I'm saying.
Understood. Thank you, Karan. Thank you.
Thanks, Prashant. The next question is from the line of Nishant. Nishant, you may please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. This is Nischint here from Kotak. Am I audible?
Yeah, Nishant, you're audible. Thank you.
Thanks. Just trying to understand, did you mention that you want to take the net worth down to 2,000 crores?
Yeah, so I mentioned that Nishant 2 quarters back also. I think net worth outside of the goodwill and the intangibles. So effectively, we've got around about today we would have taken 2 steps around it. Basically, 350 crores of broad dividend payout last year, and a 350 crore kind of 350 crore optimal kind of dividend payout this year, which takes us down to 2,000 odd crores of net worth outside of the goodwill and intangibles. That's additionally there.
And you possibly look at another 350 crores this year, assuming that you'll be able to kind of monetize
Yes. Either monetize it or get the right debt structuring around it, because now the cost of borrowing is also at effectively at 675 to 7 or 7.25. So at some point it will be a decision on whether borrowing it at 7 versus the price we are getting, which one makes more sense. Because even on the balance sheet side, we are absolutely unlevered on the NBFC side. So we'll take the right decision around it.
Sure, got it. Thanks. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nishant. We have the next question from Prashant. Prashant, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, Karan, so just a follow up. So you have around 1,400 to 500 of MLDs somewhere in June, July. So what is the plan around that to refinance or repay, and how would the maturity for the balance debt stack up?
No, so I think from our perspective of getting it refinanced, it's fairly simple. There's a huge amount of demand on our MLDs, so that's not a problem at all. I think we've already kind of, from a repayment perspective, we've already had the money sitting in liquid from the last 30 to 45 days. Actually, honestly, last 15 to 18 months is from a asset liability mismatch perspective, it's kind of the liquidity buffer has really costed us in that sense. So that will get fully corrected also over this quarter, because from a borrowing perspective, a new borrowing perspective, we'll obviously end up borrowing substantially, a little much more conservatively than what we had done historically. But from a cost of borrowing perspective, as I said earlier, it will come down to the 675-7 versus all these MLDs historically have been in the region of 860 to 875.
Sure. And just on this net worth point, so how should we look at it? What would be the kind of leverage you would want to maintain on the NBFC?
So I think the leverage on the NBFC will be in the region of on a pure net worth of, let's say, 1,130 crores. If outside of this dividend, let's say the net worth's at 1,000 crores, the leverage would be in the region of 4.5-5 times. Yeah. So broadly, in 4,000 odd crores of loan book addition in addition to the net worth.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prashant. Just a reminder, in case anybody wishes to ask a question, please click on the raise hand icon. You just wait for a couple of minutes in case questions come up.
Hi, just a quick addition to that previous question. Out of the 137 crores of other income, broadly 100 crores comes from the AIF and PMS net of borrowing, and the rest is the other items.
Great.
Sanjay, Karan, we just have one more question.
Sorry.
Sanjay, you may please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi guys, this is Sanjay from iPad PMS. So this is regarding the special dividend. So over and above the special dividend of 350 crores, FY22's PAT also will be distributed along the similar lines of 75%, 80%.
That's right. So I think we guided similarly when we did the special dividend last year. I think there will be two kind of opportunities to do a special dividend, one last year and one this year. After that, we are back to our stable capital of around about 2,000 crores. And outside of that, obviously 70 to 80% of our dividends, which will be coming out of profits every year, we will look to distribute.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay. We have the next question from the line of Devrat. Devrat, you may please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Karan. Hi.
Hi,
Devrat from Capital. How are you?
Hi, all well. How are you?
I'm good as well. Hey, just one quick question. So on your guidance that you all have put out for FY22 and FY23, if I look at, your closing AUM of 207 lakh crore, going to 245 next year and then 285 the year after that. And if I add the net new flows that you'll have, which is 20 and 25,000 crores, I thought there were a lot more assets which were locked up in the, where you had already made a trail commission historically, which would have gotten added into the recurring asset bucket. So what am I missing there? Like, am I missing anything there?
No, so I think on the total AUM bucket, if you see on the 207 and 20,000, it broadly kind of takes into account three things. It takes into account transaction assets also. On the ARR side, I think we will end up seeing a larger movement as compared to the 15-20,000 crores anticipated on the total AUM. I don't know if I'm answering you correctly, but 6 to 7% is the growth in net flows on an overall basis. But on the ARR side, we'll see a much stronger growth. I think the 100,000 crores should grow by at least 15 to 20,000 crores next year.
Understood. Okay, that's super clear. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Devrat. We have the next question from the line of Alpesh. Alpesh, you may please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Karan. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Alpesh. Yeah, hi. How are you?
I'm fine, Alpesh. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Just one question on the net worth side. You mentioned around 2,000 crores. Do you have any rough breakup in mind that how much would go towards the AMC wealth and for your lending business?
No, absolutely. I have a good breakup in mind. So I think around about 1,000 odd crores in the NBFC, 500 odd crores on the asset management side, 400 crores in the on the wealth management side, and 100 crores would basically be the cash balance requirements in the holding company and some of our offshore subsidiaries.
And this 400 and 500 crores, 900 crores put together, that would be largely invested into as a sponsor investment into AIFs, right?
Yeah, sponsor investments into AIFs is coming down fairly quickly. We had to do large investments 2.5, 3 years back or 4 years back when we started out the business. In all our new AIFs, we are only committing the minimum sponsor capital of 5 crores. So actually, if you break up our investments over the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years, our new investments into our AIFs is very, very low. And as I think these numbers of this 800-900 crores will come down dramatically over the next 24 months as these get redeemed. Obviously, it's kind of got increased a bit over the last couple of quarters because of mark to market, not because of really. So the last 3 schemes we've raised, we raised a 6-year private equity fund, which was called Market Monopoly in Financial Services last quarter. So it was an 1,800 crore fund, but we've put in only 5 crores. Similarly, we've raised another fund, 2 funds this quarter of 2,000 crores and another 800 crores. Our contribution is only 5 crores each. So from now on, we are really able to put in the minimum amount of 5 crores. We don't need to put in the large amount. So I think we will at the right point of time settle at somewhere between the 1.5 odd percent of contribution into our own AIFs. Relative to the size of our fund. So today, for example, we would be at close to around about 28 to 30,000 crores of AIFs under management. Ideally, if all things being equal, we should not have more than 350-400 crores invested in our own AIFs.
The rest around 500 crores would be for what? In the sense, basically this business does not require any capital. So why do we need to keep 500 crores?
Just for this.
Okay, so whatever the capital that you will have into wealth management and AMC, that would be largely invested into our own funds. Right?
Absolutely.
That would be minor working capital related requirements, but nothing.
Yeah, nothing really. Working capital is only 2 things really. Broadly speaking, if you just look at all the 3 businesses put together, In some cases, the management fees comes on the end of the month. In some cases, it comes at the end of the quarter. In some cases, the interest comes at the end of the quarter, and some cases at the end of the month. So broadly speaking, your current assets tend to be close to around about 2.5, 3 months at the maximum. So on a revenue base of 1,000 to 1,100 crores, you would have a current asset number of around about 230 to 250 odd crores. You would have fixed deposits with the exchanges approximately 100 to 125 crores because we're fairly conservative there. So that would be 350, 400 odd crores and another 400 odd crores, 450 crores of investments into AIFs. That's broadly the capital requirement. There's nothing else really.
Just one more question. In this quarter, based out of the net flows that you received, there seems to be one chunky the investment that has come into your PMS business. If I net off that, then what gives you the confidence of the very strong net inflows for FY22 now? Because if you net off that, then the net inflows in this quarter are also not very, very encouraging as such.
So I think it's approximately 4,000 crores outside of that. So 5,800 odd crores is the net flows for the previous quarter. And if I was to exclude this institutional mandate of around about 1,500 to 2,000 crores, because all of it also is kind of coming through last quarter and part of it this quarter. But overall, I think at 3,500, 4,000 crores of net flows for the last quarter. And the way we kind of getting kind of a response to some of our products on the asset management side, I am fairly confident we might end up at a fairly decent number close to the 20,000 crores.
And all the best.
Thanks, Alpesh. The next question is from the line of Nihar Shah. Nihar, you may unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, Karan. Just a quick clarification to one of the questions asked previously. You already have close to about 22,000 crores sitting in either mutual funds or managed accounts where the upfront fees were received earlier. Assuming if that was to flow through more or less completely into the ARR bucket, shouldn't your ARR increase by more than the 15 to 20,000 crores that you're guiding towards, or is there something that I'm missing here?
No, I think it won't fully flow through for sure. Okay, I think it flows through from whatever our recent experience has been in broadly a region of 60 to 65%. So I think on a 2022 through 1,000 crore kind of output, I would expect around about 12 to 14,000 crores to flow through into the ARR bucket. Obviously, the 22,000 crores has got varying degrees of maturity. So we have approximately 50% of that maturing in this financial year. And we've got approximately 35 odd percent maturing next financial year and only another 15 odd percent in the year after that. So if you broadly take the 22,000 crores into 50 odd percent at 11,500 crores and approximately 2/3 of that, I think it should add around about 6,500 crores into the ARR bucket this year. In fact, we had a very large kind of similar product of 1,800 odd crores maturing 15 days back. And as of now, from where we are seeing that, approximately 60-65% of that is kind of moved back into the ARR bucket. So that's really what I think would happen.
Great. That's great. What happens to the other 30-35%? Do you lose the asset or does that move to another transaction?
No, that's transaction. It remains transactional, right? So I think clients take some time. See, fortunately, I think we've just added that slide, but loss of assets continues to be touchwood fairly low. I think from a client perspective, attrition has been in the region of 3.5%. And quantum of assets lost from these existing clients is less than 1.3, 1.4% over the last financial year. So AUM loss continues to be fairly low across the transaction piece as well as the ARR piece.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nihar. We have the last question from the line of Kunal. Kunal, you may please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, Karan.
Hi, Kunal.
So sorry, again, touching upon this question on the distribution assets, maybe wherein trail fillet has already been received or upfront fee has been received. So the only thing is maybe in FY21, how has been the conversion rate? Maybe you highlighted in terms of the outstanding, but what has happened in last year? How should we look at that in terms of how much actually flowed into ARR assets?
So it's the same number. It's in the region of that 55 to 60%. Maybe worthwhile we can do some analysis and maybe try and see what's exactly happened last year, maybe include in our next presentation, so that it gives a good visibility of the next 2 or 3 years. But it is in the same region. It's in the region of 60 or
Yeah, surely that would be helpful. Maybe just getting the sense in terms of what has happened actually.
done.
Okay,
done.
so that would
It
help.
will-
And second question was on the expense. So what we had given of say 620 odd crores, I think still in terms of the admin cost, that would still be sustained at 150, 160 odd crores, or maybe at max 170 odd crores. But still then employees round about 450, 460. Okay, and when we look at it in terms of ESOP, there will be delta of 20, 25 crores. Variable, I'm not sure from 110 how it moves. But then that suggests quite a bit of an increase on the fixed side as well. So is it again on the ESOP, we can see it in that range of another 10, 15% kind of an increase over next 2 years again on this higher base?
No, ESOP won't increase higher than 40.
Sorry, overall employee.
No, I think overall employee cost has some components to it. So on the fixed portion, we had a bit of a salary reduction from April to January last year. So in that sense, the fixed employee cost is from January this year, which is effectively including Q4, seen a bump up of approximately 2.5-3%, which is already included in the Q4 numbers, but it's not included in the Q1, Q2, Q3 numbers. So our average employee fixed cost is broadly along the Q4 lines. I think we are adding some 3 or 4 fairly large important teams on the wealth management side, and on the asset management side we are looking to add 2 very senior managers on 2 strategies. So there will be some increase on the fixed income side, fixed compensation side as far as salaries go, but it will be kind of we're not really looking at recruiting absolutely fresh juniors or laterally. We're more or less looking at fairly senior resource level hiring. On the variable side, as I said earlier, I think all put together it'll aggregate to around about the 35% number on the revenues. Depending on the year to year, it'll be very difficult to segregate that 35% exactly into fixed and variable. But it will be give or take a percent here or there around the 35% range.
Okay. And just one thing in terms of 65 wealth RMs moving to 75. So there were like 10 recruited, or there is some maybe reclassification which has happened out there compared to last presentation?
No, so there were 10 recruited, and we lost 5 RMs, out of which 2 went out, or rather 3 went out to set up their own businesses. And out of 75, only 2 have actually kind of moved out to competition.
Okay. So 65 to 70, 65 to 75 in this particular quarter.
No. 65 to 75 in this particular quarter. Partners, I think Anshuman includes AMC.
Yeah, just to highlight that number that I spoke about was AMC and wealth sales. We can again, I think we've shared now that information as well. You'll see the detailed information in the investment presentation. We've just added that as well.
Yeah. So I was looking at the closing count of 75 for wealth management, which was 65 last time. So that was the only question. Yeah, maybe.
So that would also include not just the people that got recruited, but also some of the folks that internally have gotten promoted as well. So they'll be
okay. So yeah. Okay. So that's the reason.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. That's the right thing. So there would be at least 6-7 partners who've got 6-7 principals who've got promoted to partners.
Yeah, that's what I thought, that there has to be some some. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was helpful.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That was the call. We hand it over to Karan for the closing comments.
No, thank you, everybody. I think it's as an industry and as a firm, I think we continue to evolve. I think one of the best silver linings is a large part of the regulations already in place, And while things do take a little time to get the right engagement model set with the client, I think we are very on a good stand from a regulatory perspective. And I think fairly soon the business model will look fairly set both on the asset management side and the wealth management side. Thank you.